This is section 3.2, applications, percents, portion formula. So we've got some vocabulary to learn. The first thing that we're looking at is the base, which represents the whole 100%. And one thing that you can always think about is that we're going to apply the percent to the base. So if you can figure out which number you would be applying the percent to, that can help you when you're setting these up, because often students get confused about which number goes for the base and which number goes in for the portion. And then the rate is always the percent, right? The percent that's multiplied times the base. Sometimes we know the percent and sometimes we're looking for the percent. You may want to study these definitions a little bit more. And then the portion is what you get if you multiply the base times the rate. Now, sometimes we're going to know the portion and we're going to be finding it or finding the base or the rate with it already knowing the portion. So there's lots of different things that happen with these percent problems. Okay, so this is the formula that the portion is equal to the base times the rate. And we can have any two of these numbers and find the third one. And so whenever you're setting this up, if you use the circle is really handy because it helps you know whether you're going to be multiplying or dividing, and even what you're going to be dividing or multiplying. So whenever we're finding the portion, notice that's this pink part right here, right? When we're finding the portion, then we simply take the base times the rate. And in that case, that's probably the easiest one that we'll be working with. Notice also I have these words. Is a clue word for finding the portion. Of is a clue word for multiplication, right? So if it says of some number, then that's what we're applying that rate to. And then of course the rate is the percent. This line is important because this line is telling me I'm going to divide. So if I have a number in the above the line, I'll be dividing it by some number below the line. Okay, so if we're finding the base, notice here's the base, right? If I'm finding the base, then that means I know the portion and I know the rate. So I would take the portion, right? The portion and divide it by the rate. So getting your numbers in the circle can be super helpful here. If I'm finding the rate, it's kind of like the one we just looked at, right? If I'm finding the rate, then I'm going to take the portion and divide it by the base, right? So portion divided by base, and then that's how we would get the rate. And then there's a little bit more to it, but we'll talk about that as we go. All right, so this is our first example. It says solve for the portion, base, or rate, round to the nearest hundredth as needed. Sometimes we'll need to round, sometimes we will not need to round. Now notice this one says 10,800 is 90% of what? Well, when it says 90% of, that means that I'm looking for the base, right? It's 90% of, well, I should say the base. So the base is the missing part here, and 10,800 is my portion. So 10,800 goes here. And then I know my rate is 90%. Now we are going to change that to a decimal for the actual calculation. And I'm looking for then my base. So I knew this because it said 90% of what? Well, that's what I was talking about when I said we're going to apply the percent to the base. That of tells me that the 90% goes with the base. The portion that or the part that we're looking for, right? We already know the portion. So we set it up this way. We take 10,800. We divide that by 90%, but we're going to write that in decimal form, so 0.9. and that gives us 12,000. Now I've already calculated these before I, work with the video. So if you feel like I'm going too fast, don't forget to pause and just, you can go ahead and find your number. And so that means that my base is 12,000. All right, don't forget that you need your calculator set on 9 decimal places, and that would be second format, which is on the decimal key. Second format 9 enter, and that way you've got the decimals there that you need, and you're not going to have them hidden because it's rounding for you. So you want all of the numbers showing so you can do whatever it is you need to do. All right, so this one says 45% of 300. There's that of clue word again, right? That means we're going to multiply my rate times my base. And so that means then we would be looking for the portion this time. So the of is an important word to look for because that's going to help you when you're setting these up. All right, so to find my portion, I take my base times my rate in decimal form. Right, you pull out your calculator and do this calculation, right? And you will find that your portion is 135. Now you can go back and double check, right, on some things. Like you could even divide to check this. If I took 135 and divided it by 300, because, right, the 135 would go here once I found it, then I should get 45%, right? So you can double check this by just keying it in to your calculator and check, oh yeah, that does equal 0.45, which is 45%. So that's just a check. It's always good to be able to check. Okay, continue on. So this one says something, right, blank. I got to fill in the blank. Of 250 is 65. Notice there's that of right there. So that means my multiplication of 250 is 65. Remember, the is telling us usually the portion, right? So actually 65 is my portion. 250 is my base, and it's basically saying what percent of 250 is 65. And then we're going to actually find that percent. So I am looking for the rate this time. And I will be doing a division problem. So we take 65 divided by 250, and that's going to give us 0.26. Don't forget that Connect doesn't always write the zeros or in your book, the zero in front of the decimal, and that's okay. Now, this is in decimal form, so we want to convert it to a percent, and so my rate is 26%. Remember, rates are going to be in percent form, right? Percent form for answers, but decimal form for calculating. So you have to remember that, we just switch back and forth wherever we need to. Okay. All right, so this one's a little bit different because it's more of it is a word problem. Uscourts.gov reports that there are 936,795 bankruptcy filings in 2014. If there were 310,061 Chapter 13 filings, what percent of filings were not Chapter 13? Now, when you're working with a word problem, you often are going to need to read it a few times for it to make any sense, and then start kind of picking out, okay, what is it that I'm looking for? Well, first of all, it says what percent, so right away we know we're looking for the rate, right? And then we also happen to know that there were 936,795 on the number of bankruptcies, and so that's going to be our base, right? 936,795. And now we have to figure out the portion. Well, they gave us, sorry, dog's going crazy. What they gave us was the number of Chapter 13 filings, and it's asking us for the number that are not Chapter 13. I'm going to pause for a minute. So it says that they're telling us the number of Chapter 13 filings, but it's saying which of them were not. So we have to subtract to get the number that were not Chapter 13. And so on this, we basically take the 936,795, we subtract the 310.61, and that gives us 626,734, and that will be our portion. Okay, now sometimes this is going to happen that you have to do a little work to figure out what you're actually going to put in your circle. Okay, so now we're going to divide the portion, the 626,734, by 936,795, and that's going to give us our percent. Now, also notice that I said to round to the nearest whole percent. So we are going to round this. If you checked it, you would be off if you check it by the rounded version. So if you're checking, you may want to leave the actual number you calculated on your calculator. So 0.6690, and there are more probably numbers past that, but this is enough to round it to 67%, right? Because we're rounding it to a whole percent. And that's that one. Okay. All right. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to stop this video. I think I will. And I'll pick this up on the next video and finish the lesson.